And this is why the discussion today is focused on protein, because it's one of the biggest accelerator of biological aging versus a decelerator.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. We are here talking all about protein. Protein is everywhere right now. Unless you've been living under a rock, you go to the grocery store, you open TikTok, or even walk into Starbucks, you have seen things like protein popcorn and protein coffee foam from Starbucks, protein water. There's even protein in our cereal. It is without a doubt the nutrient of the moment, but it kind of begs the question, all of this hype begs the question, have we actually lost sight of what actually matters to make us healthier? And are we choosing the right types of proteins and quantities of proteins for our unique health goals? So I wanted to lob this to you, Renee. What does protein even do? What does it do to our body, and why is everyone so about it right now?
What it does and why people are about it, I think, are actually two different answers. People are all about it because of one of the things that it does. The muscle protection, the muscle building, the muscle repair. So yes, protein does play a part in this, and it's a big part. It does support muscle building and protection. And so it is very important for this because we know that protecting our muscle, especially when we think about longevity and healthy aging, it is so important for us to be mindful of our muscle and therefore to be mindful of ensuring that we're getting adequate protein to protect it. Protein plays a role in a lot of things. In fact, protein is responsible for our enzymes, our hormones, our neurotransmitters. It's important for our immune health. The real question is, how much do we need to achieve these functions? And as you hinted at, what types of proteins and what sources are they coming from to really maximize these efforts while also protecting longevity and healthy aging, which we'll get into, I'm sure.
Yeah, somewhere along the way, the narrative shifted from protein being important to excessive protein being necessary. And I think this shift in the zeitgeist around protein and protein consumption is really creating confusion, I think, about what we actually need and what types matter most and how this actually impacts longevity specifically. And part of the reason why we started this podcast is that we're longevity dietitians. We studied at the one and only Longevity Institute here in the US at the University of Southern California. And we have, I think that we're pretty primed to talk about this topic. So I just wanted to say, from a longevity perspective, how is what you need for longevity from a protein perspective different from what you need if you are a bodybuilder, or are they the same?
That's really what I want to spend time on here is, how do we balance? How can we optimize for peak longevity and optimize for peak muscle? And it turns out that you do have to kind of live somewhere in the middle. Now, when we look at these bodybuilders who are, one, doing an insanely large amount of weight-bearing exercise, way more than the average person. They are also consuming excessive, or in their case, sometimes adequate, right, amounts of protein to support with muscle growth. What we see when we see all of this growth is growth that is not so hyper specific only to muscle, but we'll also see growth in a lot of other areas, including cellular replication. And this is where we start seeing some alarm bells being raised when we come back to this longevity space, because if you're constantly causing cellular replication, that's also a early risk factor for cancer. And that's why we also see that very excessive amounts of protein can be associated with higher rates of cancer. Now, when we shift back to this longevity space, we see some studies that show that significant calorie restriction and protein restriction is really beneficial for supporting with limiting this excessive replication and supporting healthy aging. Again, I come back to this idea of this balance. How can we meet in the middle to not go too far in either direction and support both? In the case of our bodybuilder, yes, there is so much muscle repair and synthesis to occur that the body will actually use that. When we look at, the average person, does that person actually need that amount, and are they going to use that amount? If they don't, we have to remember that protein is getting absorbed. Your body is taking it up, and it's going to eventually, if it doesn't need it, it's going to convert it. It's not just going to float around as protein. No, it's going into carbohydrate or it's going into fat, and it's going to get stored somewhere, and it's not all getting stored in your muscles. So have a double bottom line, both for longevity and muscle protection, which is kind of like full circle important for longevity too.
Very excited to talk about this. This is such a hot button topic. So we're going to cut to a really wonderful conversation that you had with Joseph Antoun, and we're really happy to have you here. Thanks for joining the Longevity Labs.
Welcome to the L-Nutra Longevity Lab series, where science meets strategy for living a longer and healthier life. This series is hosted by myself, Melanie Murhpy Richter, and my colleague, Renee Fitton, two longevity dietitians who have their masters in nutrition, health span, and longevity from the Longevity Institute at the University of Southern California. We have built private practices, started AI companies, and now are working together at L-Nutra to shape longevity science into actionable steps for you to use in your everyday life. We're here to break down the latest research, help you challenge the hype, and offer you practical tools so you can feel better in your bodies, not only today, but in decades to come. From fasting to hormones, gut health, and all things food as medicine, we are diving into the research of how to stay youthful from the inside out. Whether you're just getting started or looking to go further, we're glad you're here.
I am so incredibly excited to be sharing this stage with Dr. Joseph Antoun. He is an MD, PhD with 3 master's degrees from Harvard and Hopkins. His background is incredible. He is a visionary, a scientist in the field of longevity, and has remained dedicated to enhancing human health span through cutting-edge nutrition technology. He is, of course, the CEO at L-Nutra, the parent company of Prolon, for over 7 years. And under his leadership, we've spent decades uncovering the relationship between nutrition and longevity. So he is truly the perfect person to be diving into this topic of protein and uncovering what is going on here.
What joins us here today is our love for the right ethical nutrition, the love for Prolon, and the love for longevity.
We know that there's a lot of conflicting information out there about protein, especially. How much do we need? What are the best sources? How does this impact our health? Today, we are going to clear up as much of that confusion as possible, answer your questions, and give you clear science-backed recommendations to dive right on in. Let's just start with the biggest question. What are the biggest misconceptions around protein?
Where there are 4 probably big misconceptions about protein we're going to cover today. The first one is our proteins, like the good macronutrients, and carbs are the bad macronutrients, right? Everyone today is like, eat as many proteins as you can and go very low on carb. And what we know, part of a longevity diet is balancing both. Proteins are important, essential to bones, muscle, obviously hormones, enzymes, everything in the body. And it's very important to have the right amount of protein. And we're going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the misconception of how good and how much protein to consume per day. And so the longevity diet that we recommend, that we have studied with Professor Alberto Longo and with 18 universities, have helped us understand how much protein to consume per day, how much carbs, and at different age and steps of life. And I'll put it right away on the table. We are a big proponent of a plant-based source of protein mainly. That's the second misconception. We're going to talk about animal sourcing versus plant-based sourcing. Plant-based is the main source. Then we do fish. We recommend doing fish 2 to 3 times per week. Eggs, 1 time per week. White meat, white source of meat, 1 time per week. And you can, if you're a flexitarian, you can go to few times, say 2 to 3 times per month, have your red meat. So the basics of the longevity diet, it's a plant-based diet, it's pescatarian. Fish is the main source of the proteins. The plant-based source of protein you want to get comes mainly from beans, from peas, and from chickpeas. They bring you a lot of the essential amino acids, not just the plant-based sources of protein. And then also seeds and nuts could be a good complement there. The first myth we want to debunk here is too much protein, is it good or not? And proteins are very important trigger to growth in the body. And every time we eat proteins, there's a hormone called the insulin-like growth factor, IGF. It pushes the body to grow. So when we eat carbs, insulin increase. We all know that. We talked about very frequently. But when we eat protein, IGF increase, insulin-like growth factor. It's another growth factor. So too much protein induces too much accelerated aging. Every time we eat, say, from a plate rich in carbs and proteins, we're spiking insulin, we're spiking IGF, insulin-like growth factor. So it is a pro-aging source. And this is why part of a longevity diet, we have to control the amounts of protein that we take. We recommend that if you're below age 65, in the age of 40 to 65 is a tricky age when it comes to protein consumption. And I'll talk about that. We call it the pre-disease age. But if you're 40 to 65, you can get 0.3 to 0.36 grams of protein per pound. If you want to think about it, it's a third of your weight. So if you're 150 pounds, you take 50 grams of proteins. If you're interested in, if you're very physically active and you're interested in building muscle, you can increase that by 10, 20%. Now, above age 65, you can go a little bit more on proteins because muscle becomes an organ of longevity. It's very important after age 65 when you lose your muscle, when you become a little bit more frail. Mobility and muscle are so important at that time. So after age 65, you increase a little bit the level of the proteins and you can go a little bit more animal sources of protein. Why we're separating below 65 and above 65? This is very important. Between age 40 and 65 is a very tricky pre-disease age, especially cancer. When you're pushing your cells to grow, to replicate, between age 40 and 65, we're old enough for cells to make a mistake and become cancerous while replicating and never stop. And we're young enough for cells to respond to the push of IGF. So when you eat proteins at that age, high protein, you're pushing the cells to replicate. They're old enough to do the mistake, and yet they're young enough to the probability of that mistake to happen. Above age 65, the risk of cancer decreases, actually. You don't die of cancer at age 90 or age 85. Cancer starts forming at between 40 and 65, and then you die out of cancer in between age 65 and 80. And this way is critical. There's a perfect correlation between protein consumption in that age window, 40 to 65, and the acceleration of aging and the risk of cancer. Very, very, very important because the protein industry keeps pushing protein to us. They're pushing women going through menopause to compensate with high protein intake and with animal sources of protein and a lot of protein shakes, the whey protein and the animal sources. So myth number one, a longevity diet is mainly plant-based source of proteins. Myth number two, do not over consume proteins, especially during the age 40 to 65. So you don't accelerate aging and you don't accelerate the risk of cancer that comes with it.
In today's world where we start hearing a lot of these 100 grams of protein recommendations, it can get almost dangerous. And I think it's maybe worth really tapping into that comment that you made about IGF-1 and that being really maximized when we overeat protein, when we are excessively consuming, and especially certain types of protein, that IGF-1 spike. For people who are maybe less familiar with IGF-1, can we really sink our teeth into what IGF-1 is, what are the problems with it, and how protein is connected with that?
To recap, proteins are essential and they're great. We're not against proteins. It's just the over increase in proteins that a lot of us are doing it because of the push in marketing and the marketing companies. And we're going to talk more about the sourcing, animal versus plant-based, is what's accelerating the aging without the short-term benefits. So I get a lot of questions. I'm a 45-year-old, I'm a 50-year-old male or female. I love being active. I love maintaining good shape. I love, looking in shape and being a little bit fit and muscular. Proteins should be my friends. And the answer is yes, up to the 0.30, 0.3 to 0.36, increase it a little bit by 10, 20% if you're physically active. But anything above that, it's just pushing the body to produce IGF. It's accelerating your aging process while not contributing any longer to the muscle. If every time we eat protein, the muscle grows, you can be an Olympian, fit athletes in 6 months, right? So there's diminishing benefit to the muscle when you cross these numbers per day, that then you're paying the price in acceleration of aging, but you're not benefiting your muscle any longer. Why we're talking a little bit about the age and the acceleration of aging or deceleration of aging, because that's the essence of how to live a healthy, long life. I'll zoom out, and this is why we exist as L-Nutra and as Prolon. The entire objective here is to help people through our nutritional products to decelerate the rate of biological age or to reverse your bio-age. And why is that important? Because aging is the mother of the four killers. In the US, 90% of the causes of death come from diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease. Internationally, between 75 and 87% of death comes from these four killers. I'll repeat them: Alzheimer's, age-related; cardiovascular, you're not going to get a heart attack at age 20, you get it at later age; cancer, and cardiovascular and diabetes. Most diabetes type 2 come with age as well. If you want to live a healthy, long life, you want to decelerate the rate of aging, or you want to reverse their biological age. And when you're 55 and you're going to have the heart attack, your first heart attack in 5 years, or diabetes in 6 years, or Alzheimer's in 20 years, if biologically we keep you at age 50 or at age 45, then we gave you an extra 10 years of healthy life before you hit one of these chronic diseases. And this is why the discussion today is focused on protein, because it's one of the biggest accelerator of biological aging versus a decelerator of biological age. So it is important today, our biggest message is how much protein to take so that we're feeding muscle, we're feeding the body, the hormones, etc., without paying the price of accelerating our age. The last thing we want, if you're age 50, you don't want to be 55 from the inside, because you're just going faster into one of the four big killers. How can we use proteins as a tool on the positive side to support your body's growth and operations, but at the same time to not pay the price of accelerating the aging? And a lot of the science is showing is the high protein consumers, they actually live a little bit shorter, they develop cancer at a higher rate, and they develop diabetes at a higher rate. And even Alzheimer's today is called diabetes type 3. How come protein now suddenly can contribute to all these health conditions? Is by accelerating aging, which then aging takes us into one of these four killers.
Too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. I like also picturing the U-shaped curve. Too little, not good; medium, good; too much, not good. So we want to live in this happy medium.
What Renee is referring to is a meta-analysis that we published around 6 or 7 months ago. What is a meta-analysis? Meaning it gathers all the articles published on protein and longevity, puts them all together, and looks at what's common denominator, what is the biggest conclusion that we can carry from all these clinical trials. And this meta-analysis showed that the ideal level of IGF, insulin-like growth factor, you want to have in your blood is between 140 and 160. If you go below that, so you have less proteins, you have less IGF, you'll be a little bit more frail. A lot of vegan / plant-based people actually end up being a little bit below that 140, and we're going to talk about that. Now, if you're more carnivore, if you eat a lot of proteins as well throughout the day, you're going to be above 160, and now you're prone at acceleration of aging and prone at cancer and other chronic disease. So the ideal, the U-shaped curve that Renee is talking about is where can we be to be at the ideal balance of strong muscle and slower age, is that 140 to 160 IGF level. What is also as important is the sources of the proteins, right? Because an animal source of protein, and this is the third myth we want to debunk today, is a lot of push towards animal sources of protein, a lot of marketing push now I see on social media, a lot of people writing books about the carnivore diet and about eating meat as a main source of protein, which is definitely not a longevity diet, which is, I would call it a shortevity diet. If you want to live shorter, you can eat meat all the time. And we see that, right? The big Olympic or muscle builders. And it's very well known that they age faster and they die younger because they eat 6 to 7 times high protein diet every day. They look great on the short term, so they can influence you to do their diet because they look great, and it's like, wow, this is great. I'm going to do the same. You're actually accelerating your inner age, and you end up being older at every age, every chronological age of life, and you end up dying sooner. And this is very well documented for those who know Ronnie Coleman or other big Mr. Olympia competing athletes. They look much older at their age. And this is why Arnold Schwarzenegger turned out into full vegan, and the big documentary on Netflix, Game Changer, was all about these smart athletes that did it wrong when they were young and they were eating a lot of proteins and a lot of animal sources of protein. They all turned plant-based to balance their longevity and to not over-accelerate the rate of aging, rate of cardiovascular cancer and Alzheimer's diseases. So why animal sources are not that good for longevity? Because they spike IGF more than a plant-based source of protein. So if you're eating a steak versus you're eating the same weight in a salad and nuts and seeds, the response of the body, the growth response, is higher as a response to meat. This is why if you want to build muscle fast, you go for meat, you're going to build it fast. But what does that mean? It means the signals of growth, they were very high. And these are the same signals of aging, and you're aging much faster. So the recommendation is go plant-based plus some fish. Why we like fish? Because it spikes IGF a little bit less, but it's balanced with the omegas as well. And that combination is very healthy for longevity.
How many grams per kilogram or grams per pound would you recommend?
0.31 to 0.36 grams of protein per pound. So I keep in mind, keep the average in mind, 0.33. 0.33 is what? As a third. So if you're a 150 pounder, a third of that, remember it's 50. It's if you're 120 pounder, it's then 40 grams of protein. If you're physically active, you can add 10 to 20% of that. And if you are above age 65, you can add 10 to 20% on top of this calculation. By the way, it happens that the World Health Organization has the same recommendation. They don't split per age, but they have that general recommendation for the proteins to be at the same rate.
Recommendation is actually still a reasonable amount of protein. And nowadays, especially with a lot of the recommendations over recommending protein, there is a lot of protein powder as a way to meet our needs. So you mentioned, yes, that we want to focus on plant-based versus animal-based. What about protein powders? Where do those fall into all of this mix?
This is the myth number 4 that I wanted to buckle today is we as Alitra, a lot of you guys, the pro owners, ask us about how much proteins, where can we trust getting the proteins, how can we, so we worked with 18 universities around the world, Stanford and USC and others, to develop the fasting mimicking nutrition. And then we selected 2, USC and EFOB, to work with us to develop the first protein powder that actually is all plant-based, that doesn't spike IGF, that includes the omegas, includes minerals and vitamins, and actually can help you get 25 grams of protein per serving, so satisfy the needs of the day without spiking IGF, and is called the first longevity protein. What I wanted to buckle here is when we went to producing that, the L protein or the longevity protein, I had one of the biggest lessons in nutrition in my life, where we sent the formula and it's a patented formula, and we sent it to the first producer, and they came back with a sample, and they had added 2 or 3 ingredients that we've never heard of and that we've never added, to the formulation. And I was like, what is that? Including silica and others. They said, well, protein powders are chalky, and every supplier in the US would add some extra ingredients just to make the production a little bit cheaper and a little bit easier. And it was shocking to us. So I thought it was the issue with that supplier. I went to the second and the third and the fourth, and it's the same story. So we delayed the launch of the L protein by 16 months just to be able to reshape the production of one of the US manufacturers who wanted to work with us on having a truthfully clean label. One big secret I learned there, they were like, don't worry, you don't need to declare these extra ingredients. I'm like, why you don't need to put them on the label? And they said everything below 2% of the total ingredients in the label, you don't have to declare it per the US labeling regulations. So you can add 4 or 5 ingredients. Each one of them is below 2%. So the total could be 6 to 8%. And some of them could be, cancerogenic, and we don't know about that. We're consuming all this in the US, all this food that probably has ingredients that we don't have to declare. So obviously we at L Nutra, we're very, very OCD about the supply, where we bring our ingredients from. We toured the world into the longevity zones to find the right ingredients, into clean ingredients and premium ingredients. So we had to wait 16 months on reshaping the production of the protein so that it's 100% vegan, 100% plant source of proteins for the minerals and the vitamins. And we added the omegas to it to make it a further longevity protein. And it's at least one of the cleanest proteins that we can say in the United States that you can buy, knowing the ingredients and knowing exactly what's in it and nothing more. I do it, my kids, my wife, my relatives, the employees. This is the clean ingredients that we would put in our body for longevity.
Well, I mean, to spend 16 months trying to find the right supplier, it is almost scary to think what's going on out there in all of the rest of the protein powders in the world. There are many other reasons why somebody may want to choose the L protein specifically. Can you talk a little bit about the reason and the science behind the L protein?
There's 3 main uses of this protein. If you are healthy and you're interested in longevity, well, losing a little bit of weight, protecting your muscle, yet balancing the rate of your aging, and therefore wanting to live a healthy, long life. You can do the protein. It's, again, we call it the L protein by Prolon, and it's 25 grams per serving. So if you're a 150-pounder and you're going to eat mainly plant-based diet throughout the day, you can do 1 or 2 servings per day. The best thing to do if you're mainly a carnivore is swap 1 or 2 meals per day, the red meat, swap it with the L protein. Have your salads, have your legumes. Legumes are rich in protein to take the plant-based. Have your seeds, have your nuts. They all are rich in very good levels and balance of healthy fats, proteins, and carbs, complex carbs. And then have the protein shake in 1 or 2 servings. I do it once a day. When I go to the gym, I do it twice for that day. And it's mainly to not over accelerate the rate of aging and to maintain your body weight, because you're not, it's not rich. It's very low glycemic index. It's not rich in carb, and it's not high in calories. So that's group 1. 1 serving per day, 1 to 2 max, and then you can do it every day. It's very clean, very healthy, 100% plant-based. For people with diabetes, and for anyone listening here to us that is suffering with any metabolic, so with blood cholesterol, blood triglyceride, blood sugar, blood pressure, we have a program that's called the L Nutra Health. You can go there, and there's a special program for diabetic patients to regress from diabetes. And part of the program is the fasting mimicking diet, like Prolon, modified for diabetes. And our dietitians there, you have dietitians coaching you every month, is they're offering the L protein because it's a very low glycemic index. It nourishes the muscles. So a diabetic patient, this is what medicine, the Western typical allopathic medicine, where I come from initially, misses it. Even with the Harvards and the Hopkins degrees, we missed understanding the root cause of diabetes. Diabetes is a combination of 3 things: aging, and there's no pill in the market today that works on aging. Prolon and the fasting mimicking diet does. Muscle and metabolic rate, because if the muscle is strong and you have a high metabolic rate, you burn the carbs, you don't overstore them. And also the problem here is most diabetic drugs and most chronic diets, they help you lose muscle. So for all of those who have tried or want to try Ozempic, 25% to 30% of the weight loss with Ozempic is going to be muscle. So you're going to get addicted to it because the day you stop it, you have much less muscle, and therefore you're going to pick up the new food into fat. You're not burning them, and you're going to go back having more fat, less muscle, and more prone to diabetes. So this is where Prolon is king. Prolon protects lean body mass. And the fasting mimicking diet rejuvenates the muscle and feeds the muscle. So second root cause of diabetes. The third root cause is the overweight, the insulin resistance. And as you know, the fasting mimicking diet taps directly into this visceral fat and insulin resistance. So we love the FMD for diabetes. We've tested it in 2 clinical trials. It's showing that in 6 months, 2/3 of the patient drop a medication. So imagine diabetes today, if you go to any doctor, is a progressive disease. You start with one pill, metformin, then you add another one, then after 15 years, your pancreas fails, and then it will give you insulin to replace your pancreas. That's the story of diabetes. How I was taught diabetes. And this is why I left medicine, because I was just giving people 4 or 5 pills for the rest of their lives. Today, we are regressing diabetes with L-Nutra Health. If you have any metabolic issue, including blood sugar or blood pressure or cholesterol, go there. Use the secret code longevity. Is going to give you also a discount on the program. But we use the proteins there as well because they're low glycemic index. They nourish the muscle and they don't accelerate aging. So they're helping the patients to maintain their metabolism, their muscle, and not progress in diabetes. The third use of the L-protein, and as I mentioned, the L-protein was, and just to give an idea how scientific it was, it's probably $4 or $5 million in the research, and 2 universities for 3 years, plus us, all together to be able to discover it and be novel enough to put patents behind it. But one of the universities that helped us on it is called IFOM, which is a Cancer Research Center Institute in Italy. It's one of the biggest cancer research institute in Europe. And why we brought a cancer research center on a protein? Because one of the biggest thing we're frustrated with is when you have cancer, first of all, protein is one of the biggest driver in aging and cancer. There's a perfect correlation. And if IGF is high in your blood, you're eating proteins frequently, your risk of acceleration of aging and cancer is very high. So it's not just as a prevention, but a lot of cancer patients, as you know, with chemotherapy, they lose a lot of weight, they become frail. And most doctors would prescribe them to protein shakes. I don't want to mention brands, but there are 2 brands making billions of dollars of selling protein shakes to strengthen the frail cancer patients. The problem is these are very rich in carbs, but also mainly in animal source of protein. You're feeding the cancer. The cancer, once you have cancer, it's the fastest growing organ in the blood, in the body. So when you're drinking a high level of protein shake, yes, you're a little bit nourishing the muscle, but you're feeding cancer big time, and you're increasing IGF high, which then is pushing cancer to grow even further. It's not a healthy way to replenish a patient to give high animal sources of protein. So one reason to develop our L-protein was to nourish the cancer patient with plant-based sources of protein, not spike the growth factors so cancer doesn't grow further. But in the L-protein, we put minerals and vitamins. We put omegas. We even have omegas, extra virgin olive oil. So it is a mini source of energy and calorie to the cancer patients. As we know, extra virgin olive oil do not push cancer. The fat is not a main macronutrient for cancer. So we're giving a mini longevity diet for the cancer patient to help them recover weight-wise and strength-wise without overnourishing the cancer.
Well, it almost sounds like it's good for pretty much everybody, and maybe even especially good for people with metabolic concerns or, going through some sort of cancer treatment. So this is really a revolution, I think, in protein today, especially with the care that was taken into building something so clean.
We're big on science. I mean, the CEO of the company is MD, PhD. The founder is Walter is PhD. Our chief medical officer was the head of diabetes at Harvard, so I'm digging a lot into the science, but there are simplistic things as well that we got to mention that can work for everyone. So the L protein is great for everyone who wants to lose weight and build muscle. If you guys wanna strengthen your muscle, you're physically active. What we're trying to tell you, do not lean on a meat-based diet. Do not lean on the typical protein shakes in the market that have ingredients that are not declared in the label, and many of them, whey protein and other sources, have animal sources of protein. Lean on the protein mix like the L protein, where you have the right sequence of plant-based amino acids. You're placing your IGF in between 140, 160, ideal to protect your muscle and not accelerate your aging. This will help you stay active. It will help you balance your weight. It will help you to age gracefully. One final thing I want to add here is one of our biggest mission is also to protect the planet and the lives that lives within it. And going plant-based on protein avoids the growth of the livestock industry and the cattle industry. As you know, I don't know if you know, but actually it's among the top two biggest polluter of the planet is the livestock industry. It's even more than the cars and the gas emission. It competes with fossil fuel production. Both are the two biggest polluters of the planet. By going more plant-based, we're saving the planets and the lives that live within it. It happened that it also saves our lives and help us age gracefully and not accelerate our rate of aging towards one of the big four chronic diseases. We just started our 40th clinical trial, 40 companies, and I don't want to name, with multi-billion dollars in revenues. They don't even invest a penny or a few pennies in clinical trials. This is a company that uses the revenues from Prolon to go and fund clinical trials. And we just started the 40th clinical trial. And it's important because we got to bring you ethical science so that you trust us and you trust consuming from us and you trust our recommendations to help you living a healthy, long life. Is the biggest frustration today is every day there's a book on food. Every day there's a social media influencer that's talking about eating this and eating that. It's about time to have an ethical company that puts true science behind nutrition. So I want to thank you. It's you purchasing Prolon that helped us get all the way here. I want to also thank you for helping us touch your life in a positive way and support the mission of our founder, Walter Longo. For those who don't know, also we take a fraction of the sale of Prolon and the L protein, and we donated to the Create Cures Foundation so that we help the people access to the medicine through the foundations that Walter has set up. We're going to hopefully build together an ethical company that can grow and support us and our families live a healthy, long life.
Are there some of negative effects of consuming too much protein offset by exercising or lifting weights? So essentially, can you exercise your way out of eating too much animal protein?
Well, the exercise will help you build the muscle and burn otherwise excess calories that you ingest. Is not going to delete the fact that IGF increases in your body because you ate the protein. So it's not the story like carbs, where if I eat carbs, I eat a lot of carbs, I exercise, I burn that, therefore it's not stored. We're not talking about counting calories with proteins. We're talking about spiking IGF, which will happen no matter what. So the answer is no. It could counter a little bit the effect by aging healthy because you exercise, but it's not going to specifically counter the excess IGF. This is not excess calories that you can burn.
Is whey protein considered bad for otherwise plant-based diets?
Yeah, I mean, whey protein spikes IGF more than the typical plant-based, right? Because of the sourcing. So I wouldn't say it's bad, but I would say it's worse than the plant-based sources of protein, and it's a little bit better than the full meat source of protein. And if you take it into smaller portions and you keep your IGF between 140 and 160, it's still okay. What we're trying to say is, with the science now that we have and the uncovering the importance of going full vegan and plant-based on the protein source, not full vegan, pescatarian, I would say, there's a better way than consuming whey as a main source of protein.
Why eggs only once a week? Is it the eggs themselves or is it something else?
To be honest, we don't know, actually. We don't know how albumin impacts IGF vis-a-vis plant-based and animal-based. So a lot of studies around eggs are mixed. Some show that it's good for longevity, some show maybe not. So it's not religious. You can take it once or twice, or we just follow science. And the science is a little bit unclear about eggs. We don't believe it's bad, so we allow it. And Walter officially, in the longevity diet, published by him, officially includes eggs. The nature of the source, we don't know if it's good or bad. But like everything, if you eat a lot of it, then your IGF could go beyond 160, and then it will be a trigger for aging. So in moderation, I think it would be acceptable.
Should vegans start eating fish? The recommendation to possibly include fish weekly. What would your recommendation be for vegans?
The vegans have to watch a little bit out from lack of essential amino acids, unless they eat a lot of chickpea and pea and beans to compensate for that. And a little bit less lack of vitamin D and B12 and calcium that is not super rich unless you eat the dark sources of leaves and plant-based. So, and if you're restrictive vegan, then your IGF will be below 140. It is a concern for frailty and for losing muscle. That is okay between age 40 and 60, but you don't want to get into your 65, 70, and 80 being frail at that age. And especially if you're a woman, you don't want to hit your menopause starting with lower muscle mass and losing more from there. So I would definitely recommend that if you're vegan, you add the L protein to your it's much better than adding steak or meat. You'll get the 25 gram per serving. And if you think about if you have 2 servings per day, you get your full 50 grams of protein. If you're below, 140 pound, 130 pound, you just have 1 serving per day. You get the rest of your sources of protein from the salads you're eating, from the legumes, from the nuts. Almonds, hazelnuts are very well known to be great sources of plant-based of protein, and they are a longevity mix. We call them the longevity nuts. This is why we also did the L spread, the longevity spread, which is mostly nuts. The balance of complex carbs, plant-based source of protein, and the omegas is a very good longevity. I call almonds the longevity nuts. And so you can, if you're below 140 pound, 1 serving of the L protein. If you're above 140, 150 pounds, touching the 200, then you can have up to 2, and the rest could be plant-based. You can add fish as well, for sure. We think fish, although it spikes IGF a little bit more than the plant-based, but it has the right omegas, it has the right other sources of, make sure fish is not high in mercury, though. So yeah, both ways are good ways in here.
Right. So there are solutions for vegans. You absolutely don't have to add fish into your diet. You can replace it with L protein, and also make sure that you get those omegas in. If you are using intermittent fasting and limiting the time of protein consumption, would you have to push of IGF-1 during that time, but not outside of the feeding, thereby reducing the IGF-1 throughout most of the day? So essentially it's asking about, if you just consume protein at one time, do you have too big of a spike or not in the IGF?
That's a pretty sophisticated question. This is a savvy question. So I don't think it's a per day fluctuation of IGF. So if you are, first of all, what kind of intermittent fasting? And let's clarify here, we are supportive of intermittent fasting that goes for 12 hours, max 13, 14 hours. If you want to go longer, you do it with the fasting nutrition, fast bar or shake. That 12 hours is a natural circadian, overnight hours. It wouldn't deplete your IGF. A lot of some amino acids are produced by the body, and the others are being digested from dinner, so you're not getting depleted. So you don't need to overcompensate during the rest of the day. You just keep your daily average or your average IGF between 140, 160, even if you're doing intermittent fasting. Just keep your other 2 meals afterwards, reaching that 40, 50 grams of protein if you're between 130, 150 pounder.
How would you change protein recommendations based off of medical conditions, or what would you recommend for people who have medical conditions to get better personalized recommendations?
You kind of indirectly answered it, but I'll refresh. If for longevity purposes, you balance your proteins based on the recommendations we set, say 0.33 per pound gram of protein per pound. And that's for longevity to keep your IGF between 140 and 160. Now, if you're diabetic, and this is before age 65, after age 65, it can go 10, 20% higher. If you're diabetic, Muscle is important. So if you're diabetic, this is why we love the L protein, is it's a low glycemic protein, and then still is feeding, giving you the essential amino acid, feeding the muscle, therefore keeping your metabolic rate high, and therefore you burn the carb that you're eating rather than storing and adding to insulin resistance. The tricky place is cancer, because cancer loves carbs and protein, and even proteins. Carbs are more for, fat and metabolism. Proteins are more for cells. Protein pushes the cells, right? The IGF is what pushes the cell a lot. And if you have cancer, cancer loves proteins and love IGF. It just fuels it. And so it's tricky. This is where if you have a cancer patient, you want to make sure you give them and they're say they've done through a few cycles of chemo, they're a little bit frail. The mistake the doctors do today is they overgive them the protein, and a lot of the drinks are whey or animal source of protein. You want to give them okay level of protein, a little bit below normal so that you're not nourishing the muscle, and make sure you help them recover by giving them a little bit more on the carb, but mainly on the healthy fats. There's a very big secret in nutrition, which is the healthy fats. We always stay away from fats, but the fat that exists, the omegas and the fats in the almonds and the nuts, is very nourishing because it's balanced also with plant-based sources of protein and complex carbs. This is where we go more so that they're being replenished by okay carbs, healthy fats, and you give them enough protein and ask them to exercise to build back their muscle without overfeeding cancer. We just published a study 4 months ago. It's in Nature, the number one science journal of the world. And the article in Nature showed that the fact that the fasting mimicking diet helps you rejuvenate the cells with autophagy and cellular regeneration and reprogramming. It pushes different signals to the epigenetics to reprogram the cell, is helping us reverse the bioage by 2.5 years. The other products that we have, the protein helps you not accelerate aging. The L spread, not accelerate aging. The fast bar, not accelerate aging. Prolon is the only one that can reduce a bioage score because it's rejuvenating the cells and it's helping you also reset your metabolism. So if you look at our portfolio now, when you go to prolonlife.com, our main consumer website, you see Prolon the 5 days. This is to reverse your bioage, to reduce your bioage. Very important to go away from the chronic health conditions. And then all the other products that you can do between Prolon, we're going to group them in something called Everyday Longevity Everyday. You can do the proteins every day to replace the animal sources of protein. You can do the L spread, which is a chocolate spread, but it's very high. 74% of it is almond. It's almonds plus a little bit of cocoa, which is the opposite of any other chocolate in the market. They put a lot of chocolate, a lot of butter, a lot of sugar, and a little bit of because nuts are expensive, but they're very healthy. So our L spread, you eat it, and please hear moms and dads, if you have kids at home, please swap your chocolate with the L spread. It tastes better than Nutella. It tastes better than peanut butter, but it's almonds 74%, doesn't spike their insulin, doesn't spike their IGF. Great nourishment for the parents looking for longevity, and great nourishment for the kids looking for brain development because the omegas and the fats in the almonds are critical for brain development. Fast bar to slow down your age by not overeating, also in the morning, and help you lose the weight. So all these products that we launch help you not accelerate aging with food, because every time we eat, we accelerate aging, right? The number one known reason to live a healthy long life is calorie restriction. So we're trying to help you not to restrict calories, but get the same benefit as if you were calorie restricted by engineering our food, which is again the cleanest food, premium, healthy, but doesn't spike the aging factors. Prolon is still the most important product for 5 days because it takes you backwards in a bioage score.
What is the relationship between autophagy and protein intake? So maybe worth just quickly touching on what autophagy is and then going into how it's built.
So autophagy is the cellular rejuvenation, and it happens with either 2 or 3 days of fasting. You start doing autophagy, or with very intensive exercise that can take you there. Any stress, any strong deficit in calories that goes for a longer period, say 2 or 3 days, can get you into autophagy or cellular rejuvenation. And this is one of the key features of Prolon, why we decided to do 5 days of fasting mimicking diet, because we want you to get to day 3 where autophagy starts, where your cells are rejuvenating. And that's a key called the miracle of biology, to rejuvenate your body and get biologically younger. Now, if you eat proteins, you're actually not going to rejuvenate. And that's the biggest difference between Prolon and the ketogenic diet. A lot of people ask me, what is the difference between Prolon, it gets you into ketosis and fasting, and the ketogenic diet? Ketogenic diet has enough proteins for the cells to detect, and therefore it becomes a low carb, low calorie diet, but it doesn't take you into a deep fast and a deep rejuvenation. That's why in ketogenic, you don't talk about rejuvenation, you don't talk about aging, you don't talk about reversing your bioage. But with the FMD, with Prolon, definitely you're talking about that.
I always am asked that question, people thinking that they can add in bone broth and things like that and you're immediately going to block that autophagy and that fasting state. So
everything we're saying here is randomized clinical trials or long-term meta-analysis to back up what we're telling you, because it's easy. I know every day there's a thought leader preaching what they think or writing a new book. Everything we're sharing here, if you go actually to the Prolon Life site, there's a science section, and you can read all the articles that are published there in top medical journals. And or if you go to the Nutra website, nutra.com, you can see a lot of the articles there as well.
how do you measure IGF-1 levels?
Any lab tests you use, whether you do it with Quest or any other, or hospital, anywhere you go, and it's a standard test. I mean, we don't use it as frequently. Doctors, they don't use it as frequently as they do with cholesterol, triglyceride, because again, the notion that proteins and IGF are important for longevity is a new notion, and most doctors are used to measuring blood glucose and HbA1c and just focusing on the carbs, on the carbohydrate tracks. The protein tracks has been always portrayed as positive, and the more protein, the better, which is not true. And this is what we wanted to clarify for you today.
If I start eating less protein, should I eat more carbs or more fat?
The foundation of Nutra and Prolon relies on 5 pillars. We say as scientists, if something agrees with all these 5 pillars, we think it is factual. So number 1 is we study centenarians, people living 100 and beyond. Because you can preach about longevity all day long, including the folks pushing for meat and carnivore diet. There's no one centenarian that they're going to find that is muscular and has been carnivore in their life. So you gotta study people who truly go above age 100. And then epidemiology, correlation epidemiology. Studying people and populations is very important. And we can study people who eat low carb, people who eat high carb, people who eat more plant-based, more. Number 3 is what we call systems biology. Does this agree with the studies that we have done in humans and the systems biology? Number 3 is preclinical trials and lab testing. And number 4, sorry. And number 5 is clinical trials. The most important for us is when you go and you test it in humans in a randomized official setting in partnership with hospitals and universities, does it prove the concept? We used all these 5 pillars to show what is a longevity diet. And a longevity diet is okay level of proteins, we mentioned them, and then you have carbs, which is 30 to 40%. And again, people hate carbs, right? And carbs are like proteins. They're bad if you're obese and you're eating high carb. Definitely should go below. But if you're healthy and fit, carb is the engine of the body. So it's okay to have 30 or 40% of the sources of your intake from carbs. It's not a bad or even more than that, than 40 and 50 and 60. Carbs is the engine of the body. But hey, because 73% of Americans are overweight, carbs is a villain if you want to add it on top of that. And therefore, if you are overweight, if you need to lose weight, if you have high blood sugar, of course, you should go less on carbs. And then the rest is fat sources, and obviously you should go to healthy fats. The best sources of healthy fats are within the plant-based sources of food and or fish, because they're the right omegas that you want to have.
Any questions that haven't been answered, I also want to share that you can connect with our customer service team, and they will be happy to answer those questions for you as well. And with that, Dr. Antoun, I would love to leave it to you to close us out.
I want to thank everyone here. I feel I'm at home with the ProLearners. And we thank you so much. You have helped us build this company, which is doing so much to uncover science, uncover ethics in nutrition, and save a lot of people's life. As I mentioned, we were able to launch the diabetes program. This is because of your support. And we're going to launch next year cancer and autoimmune. This is with your support. And make sure you do your prolons. It's very important. And if you want to have the right proteins and the right other products, you can always shop for those at prolonlife.com.
Thank you so much, Dr. Antoun, and thank you to everybody for joining.
This episode was brought to you by El Nutra, makers of Prolon and the El Nutra Health Medical Nutrition Programs. If you enjoyed the contents in today's episode, please subscribe on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts. We're looking forward to seeing you soon.